Hi, hello everyone. How is everyone doing today? Um, so I'm feeling a few things. Today's our topic is feelings, the pathway to recovery, and I am feeling anxious and grateful and thankful to be here. And so this is my first time sharing in this way for CoDA, and so bear with me. I do want to say that I'm going to share a little bit about my history, and so I don't intend for it to be triggering to anyone, but there's some stuff, we all have stuff, right? And so just take what you like and leave the rest. All the stuff that I'm going to present today is from my own opinion and from my own journey in my recovery. And so I just want it to be uplifting and encouraging and give hope to those that need it. So with that, we'll get into it. So a little bit about my story. The first and primary thing for me was that I'm a incest survivor. I was traumatized at 8 years old for many years and by many different family members. And so my actual first foray into the 12-step world was actually through a group called Incest Survivors, I think Anonymous. I don't know. I don't even think they're around anymore, but that was way back when these kinds of groups were first getting started back in the 80s. And then had lots of issues around this and had been raped a couple times. And so as a result of some of the trauma that I sustained, my stepdad was a serial pedophile, and he had this happened to many different children. We think the number's up to 100 of both sexes, and so it was a pretty harrowing thing. He was a serious predator and went to college to get his master's degree in psychology so he could really mess with your brain. And so that's kind of a huge part of my story. His particular method with me was to target my feelings of feeling lovable and that I couldn't be loved. Those kinds of things were the ways in which he targeted me. Um, a second thing that is big in my history is that I sustained a lot of physical abuse. My mom, especially, was very physically violent and angry. Um, since she had been since the incest situation was actually generational, and she had also known that I was being molested and refused to do anything about it. In fact, she actually had me have a conference with my stepdad when I was 8 years old to tell him that I didn't want him to touch me because he had told her that I had seduced him at 8 years old. And so this is the kind of history that I have with my family. When I was a senior in high school, I had to go live with my grandparents because my mom had tried to kill me. In addition to the physical trauma, there was also and I don't have this on the screen, but there was all kinds of drug involvement with my stepdad. He actually dealt drugs. He wanted all the kids to get high. And so he would threaten to blow smoke into a bag so that I would get high because I didn't want to. I was the oldest and old enough to say that I didn't want that. And so then he would threaten those kinds of things. He got all the other kids stoned just because then they were easier to deal with and, more compliant to whatever. And so that's kind of the background. My mom ended up going to prison for drug-related felony murder with my or my half brother. They spent 7 years in prison. And I also have a developmentally disabled sister who is now living with me. And so we've got a little bit of a traumatic past going on there. There's also spiritual trauma because I have like the full gambit of spiritual influences in my life. When we started off, when I was young, when I was still an only child, we lived in Europe with my dad because he was stationed in France with the army. And at that point, he was a Mormon bishop. And then from there, I had two grandparents on each side. They were Christians of different denominations. One was a Hellfire and Brimstone. One was Methodist, which was pretty low key. Then my mom decided that she, after getting divorced from my dad at 6, she decided that she was going to become a witch. And so she lived with a warlock for a while, and so had some interesting experiences there. So kind of the full gambit of the spiritual spectrum from there. Um, Myself, I had a strong relationship with God, although with all the experiences that I had growing up, and I just really, I had a lot of confusion, a lot of anger about spirituality in God's plans for me, I guess you would say. Like many people, not only did it, extend to just all these different random spiritual messages that I was getting, but also seeing a lot of hypocrisy. Like my one grandmother who was into the hellfire and brimstone, she led the worship for the church, and she would praise louder than anybody else in tongues in church. But then we'd get out to the parking lot, and then she would shred everybody with that same tongue, and it was so bad to the point that none of my aunts and uncles wanted to be Christians or go to church or do anything like that. So there's just a lot of spiritual spiritual damage, I guess you could say. And but it's caused me to be a real seeker of that. And um just all of this stuff all combined just makes a very confusing mixed messages situation. I came out of that thinking, of course, that I was the oldest, so, and I was always held accountable for anything that happened. So because I was supposed to be the example for my brothers and sisters, and so if they got in trouble and they did something, I would be the one who got in trouble because I didn't provide a good enough example, which totally fed my perfectionism and feeling like I was never good enough and all those kinds of things that a lot of us share in those thoughts. Um, Also, too, I just really didn't know what to think. And, I learned how to keep everything down, my own feeling. I couldn't express any feelings in my family, because that was deadly. The minute that you expressed any kind of feelings, then there was going to be serious repercussions from that. And so therefore, you know feeling my feelings, really indulging my feelings, really wasn't a good thing to do in my particular situation. And so that caused a lot of damage, and particularly in the sexual trauma, the way that I coped with that, because it was so devastating. When I couldn't even, the first time that it happened, I couldn't even walk for 3 days afterwards. It was just so traumatic. And so, these kinds of things just led to a lot of damage. And I have now been in recovery for 30 years. Boy, I can tell I'm nervous. I'm like tripping over my tongue. So please bear with me, you guys. This is harder than I thought it was going to be. Um, but that dissonance between what was happening and then what we were allowed to show, because in my family it was like, on the outside, on the surface, we were the perfect family, right? We dressed right, we said all the right things, we did all the right things in public, or at least we thought we did anyway. And what happened at home stayed at home, right? You just don't let that stuff out into the into the public. And so then you were isolated, and you're constantly, and you think that you're the only one that's going through these things in the moment. That's what you think. You're the only one that's experiencing this kind of stuff. Well, now, obviously, and especially, as a result of all the different 12-step programs that I've been a part of, I know that that's not the truth, but that isolation and that uh, just keeping you separated from other people gives you that feeling that you're alone and that there's really no hope of release. And then add into that mix all that spiritual confusion. It's like, where's God in this equation? I have no idea where God is. I want to believe that there's a God greater than me, but is he really there? Or are they really there? Could it, there's all kinds of thoughts about that. And how does that play out in my life? And I came out of that thinking that I was just, I was the sacrificial lamb, if you will, that because of the situation with my brothers and sisters, where I was the one paying the price for their mistakes, it felt like everybody else was living by a whole different set of rules than I was, which didn't make sense. It was like, and there was these thoughts about, how do I get to the other side where, I'm only paying for the price of what I'm doing, or even better, that somebody else is paying the price for that. I don't know, that was kind of beyond the scope, but, just not really understanding. So going through, fast forwarding, I'm a real researcher, and I can be very tenacious at times. And so I wanted to find answers. So I read books. I ended up in therapy, which was good. I ended up in church, finding an answer. But even there, the people there were just as messed up a lot of times as I was. And so, it wasn't always a great experience, because unhealthy people, damaged people damage people, right? And so that's what was happening there. And so that further leads to more confusion about myself, more confusion about God, the whole situation. And in the midst of this, I'm trying to embrace this theory of recovery and 12-step programs. I spent time, I had friends that were in AA and NA and other programs like that. I spent some time in Al-Anon. And that was all very helpful. Went to lots of therapists, went to some different spiritual recovery groups that were through church, just lots of self-help books, just a lot of prayer, lots of things. And the one thing that was important, and I got to a point where I felt like, I had dealt with the stuff in my past. I recognized that this is what had happened, that all this had happened, and that I needed to make a choice to grow up and to recognize that it was there, that it's happened, and there's nothing that can undo what it is that's happened. But now I have a choice now. What am I going to do going forward? Am I going to allow what's happened in the past to control my future, or am I going to embrace that to the best of my ability and make the best of it? And, I did do that. The problem that I had, though, was that I had such an innate uh, practice skill, I guess you could say, from all the trauma of disassociating. I really didn't like how it felt to feel feelings. I didn't really like the feelings of shame. I didn't like being afraid. I didn't like any of those kinds of things. I didn't see any value in that. And so then I felt like I needed to just skip over that part and move on to the part where I'm dealing with this, the actions that are involved. And that works for a while, I guess. But the problem is that all those feelings, they don't go away, right? They just don't go away. And so they end up being this glacier that I have here on the picture here. So all those feelings, I kept stuffing them down and stuffing them down, and, working through life. And lo and behold, I end up with 3 autoimmune diseases, getting diagnosed at 53 as a juvenile diabetic, having been with chronic fatigue for 30 years, unknown why. And then I found out I was a diabetic, and then things changed from there. But just crazy stuff. I ended up in a marriage with a man that was a narcissist and abusive. And I'm a very, I knew, and I had told others, and I would have told anybody else, that if they were in an abusive relationship, they didn't deserve that they should get out, all those things that we say. But yet here I was in this relationship with an abusive man and a daughter, and, not knowing and feeling no hope um, in the midst of that. And hopefully this is making sense, and I'm not bouncing around too much. I feel like I kind of am, but hopefully somebody, whoever, will be able to get what they need out of this. But even to the point where I had died. I died for 4 minutes, and that was an incredible experience. And it was the most peaceful, loving. I can't even put it really into words because those words just don't even begin to touch what I felt there. And I felt the love of God. I felt the love of God. And I have been thankful too that throughout my life, even with all this confusion and all this stuff, that I have experienced God's presence in my life. And I'm thankful for that because honestly, I would have been a statistic otherwise. I probably would have already been dead years ago, completely dead. And so I'm thankful for that. And it just showed me the unconditional love because at the time when that happened, by all accounts of any kind of organized religion situation, I shouldn't have been experiencing any kind of grace or forgiveness or love because I was gigging in the clubs, and I'm a musician, so I was out in the clubs doing stuff, and I had had a marriage already, and I was not, I was having sex with people and different things like that, and so I was, by all accounts, backslidden by most people's definition of what that would be. And yet here I have this incredible encounter with God, of this incredible love, this incredible peace, just this incredible acceptance, and that flies in the face of all that religiosity. And so, anyway, moving forward, but then, and this is why I was married to my last husband. But yet here I am in the middle of this abusive marriage, and it got a little better for a while, but then got a whole lot worse. And the abuse really hadn't started at that point as far as physical abuse. It had been really only emotional and verbal abuse at that point in time. And then it continued to go. And I was married to him for 17 years. And then finally, um, when the physical abuse started to really escalate, I finally, and just by pressing into the God of my understanding, the God of my understanding started telling me, look, don't listen to what he's saying. My ex had actually got me to believe that I was crazy and that he wasn't saying the things that he was saying. The gaslighting was just incredible. And he was a master at it. And and after an encounter where he had hurt me, I took my daughter and we went to my dad's for a little bit, and then he of course said that, he wasn't going to do it anymore. And like an idiot, I believed him. It's not really like an idiot, I guess, but at the time, I came back and I didn't want to lose my family. But on the way, I was listening to this book regarding emotionally destructive marriages and what to do. And one of the recommendations in there was to start recording different things that were happening, and the thought to record conversations with my husband hit my spirit. And so I started recording the conversations, and lo and behold, I wasn't crazy. He actually was saying and doing the things that I thought that he was saying and doing. And from there, it just kind of exponentially changed. And it wasn't much longer where it got completely separated and then divorced. Took a little time though, because we owned a business together. And so there was just a lot of issues to unentangle to be able to make it official. But on April Fool's Day, it will be a full 3 years since I've been out of that relationship. And at the time, I gave up all my income, not knowing how I was going to make a living, because I just needed out and I needed myself and my daughter to be safe. And we got into counseling again. And then it wasn't too much longer from there where I had a friend from my past many years ago that I had known. And he had told me about this CoDA group. And I had been listening to some books on codependency, and I realized that, finally, that codependency wasn't a one and done solution. Like, you couldn't just get over codependency, like figure out that you were codependent, look at all the stuff and then be done. Like, it's pervasive. it creeps in. We have to continue to work on it and recognize it, because I have these patterns that I default to. There were things that actually served me well when I was younger in survival mode, but I'm wanting to go beyond survival mode. And I think that most of the people that come into CoDA are wanting to live life. That's in our preamble, I think it is. Not just survive life. I'd done a lot of surviving of life, and now I was really trying to live life. And so coming into CoDA, I had over this 30-year period of time used a lot of tools that helped me, that, because the quality of my life was getting better and better in spite of being with this narcissistic, abusive man. On all my other relationships, work and friendships, they were much better. But it's this primary love relationship, which, totally goes back to all the damage that my stepfather had done, about me feeling that I was lovable in that way. This was the part that really was still seriously damaged. And so I came into CoDA, and I realized, like, at the end of my marriage, I was completely numb. I was completely numb. All those feelings that I had been piling on, pushing down even further and further, they just couldn't be contained anymore. And so now they're like this glacier, where the tip was showing on the top. There was a little bit of emotion showing and peeking through, but there's this huge mass below the surface, and it's frozen solid. So solid, in fact, I don't even know what all is there, right? I just don't know what all the things that are there. And so that's what I came into CoDA with. And my life was unmanageable. It had gotten to be so bad that I couldn't even pick up the phone to tell the cable company, let's just say, that they had overcharged me or something. Like, the thought of doing that, and that conflict, and that was just overwhelming to me. And for those who know me, I mean, I own my own business now, again, and I'm a type A personality. So to be so fully overwhelmed with the minutia of life was just incredible. And that was just where I was when I came into CoDA. Now, I just officially, and I had a year of therapy prior to coming into CoDA, from my marriage and separation. So on Monday, I celebrated my 2 years in CoDA birthday. And so, yeah, so I'm excited about that. But when I read the patterns of recovery, and now they have the new patterns of recovery that were just adopted this last summer, but those patterns and characteristics, I identified with all of them. I had done all of them at some points in time in my life. And there was a lot of them that I had made a lot of progress in. And so me being the type A anal person that I was, I actually, where are we at time-wise? I actually downloaded the whole list and made an Excel spreadsheet, and like graded myself from 1 to 10 on, how bad I where I was at right now in my life with these patterns and characteristics. I know that seems probably pretty absurd, but it works for me, I guess. And so, so that I came up with the list of the top ones that I needed to work on. And then I started about my search for a sponsor in CoDA, and I did go through a couple sponsors, one really not great one, and then one that was better, but it just wasn't working. Our styles weren't working. And then now I have an excellent, awesome sponsor that is perfect for me. And so I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful for all of that along the way too, because every single experience that I experience now, my thought process is now that I'm right now where I need to be. One of the things that it has grown over this time of trauma in my time in recovery is that every experience that I experience is not new to God. Like, it's not like unexpected. Like, he knows exactly where I am and what I'm dealing with. And not only am I going to be able to there's a way through it, and it's for my good. For the longest time, whenever something bad would happen in my life, I felt that I was being punished, that I wasn't worthy, that there was, I was being sacrificed so other people could live a better life. It took years, I mean, 30 years for the thought to really fully rest in my spirit that anything that I'm facing, even the hard stuff, and I've had some hard stuff. I mean, when I got diagnosed with diabetes, I was in the hospital. I was in and out of a coma. I was in the hospital for a week. I already said that I died. I've had this chronic illness for lots of time. I forgot to mention that I saw family members blow up on a plane in front of me that I was supposed to be on. There's just all this stuff that happens in life, right? But getting to the point to recognize that whatever it is that I'm facing because there's something in it for me that I need to work through, and also it will benefit others. Not only it's for me and others all at the same time, and that is, in my opinion, the design. That we go through struggles. It's not for punishment's sake. It's for character building and development, in my opinion. Um, at least it has been for me in my life. And actually, all that stuff has been a blessing, which seems bizarre to say because it forced me to press in to the God of my understanding. It forced me beyond all things that I could control. These things were so out of my control that I couldn't do anything about, that I had no option but to hope on a God or a power greater than myself to be able to help me through. And that God showed up for me, and that's my belief that's what this program is about. It's a spiritual program, understanding that when we have hit that wall of unmanageability in our lives, that if we acknowledge that our lives are unmanageable, and then we come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity, and then we give over all those things to the God of our understanding and surrender those things, that there is actually hope and help to be had there. And I am here to tell you that has been the case for me. That has exactly been, with all these horrible things that have happened, but there's been wonderful things too. But just, the challenges of life, that there is hope there. There's hope in the midst of that darkest, deepest pit place where you are. There is hope there. And so that's what my time on this planet in my years of recovery have taught me. And CoDA has just been the frosting on that cake. Having those patterns and characteristics, um, actually were able to put a fine point on all these thoughts that had been germinating in my spirit all along. And I really, really I love the patterns, but I love in recovery side. I love that we have a goal in recovery. In recovery, I do X, those kinds of things. So on for today, I will say that today's focus, I've chosen a couple of the patterns and characteristics to focus on today. One of the ones that, again, I came in as an iceberg into CoDA. So feelings are a big part of my recovery journey. And so the first one that I want to focus on is that I have difficulty identifying what I'm feeling. I have difficulty identifying what I'm feeling. The next one that I want to focus on for today is that I have minimized, altered, and denied how I've truly felt. I did this in an effort to get through it and move on and get whatever thing that was in front of me taken care of, right? I was, and there's times when you need to focus on the matter at hand. Like you're in the road and a semi's coming your way. Yeah, you need to get up and get out and then think about how freaked out you were about it after the fact, right? After you're out of the path of the semi barreling down the road towards you. Sure. But I have learned that I have to be able to take the time to feel those feelings. That if I don't, then I am bound to continue to repeat the bad side, the codependence often side of those patterns and characteristics. If I don't deal with my feelings, then I'm going to be trapped in that side. And I don't want that. I don't want that for me, and I don't want that for anybody here. And so that's what I'm here to talk about today. So, some of the reasons why I have difficulty identifying what I'm feeling is that I can't quite put my finger on what it is. That feeling hasn't crystallized yet. Just not quite sure what it is that I'm feeling. And so usually I have to sit with it for a little while longer to be able to say, okay, what is it that I'm really feeling? And a lot of times I'll pull out a feelings wheel. And I have some of my sponsoring and even my therapy will we'll delve into that and we'll talk about it, and I'll have that opportunity to really experience that. I'll spend some time writing. I'll spend some time just sitting, just allowing myself to think about what it is, or just be open. I try to keep my mind clear. Sometimes I'm experiencing more than a single feeling, and they're oddly fused. For example, my mom recently died in December. And while I was feeling grief for that situation about her dying, I was also feeling relief at the same time. So both grief and relief were fused because my mom was, I love her, and we were able to get to the point where I was able to forgive her for all the stuff that she had done, but she was still messed up, and she was still continually doing stuff that was unhealthy, dysfunctional, and not in my best interest. And so I had to have some serious boundaries with her, and it was exhausting having to keep up those boundaries all the time because she was constantly hitting that boundary wall, right? And it took energy to keep that up. And so but I loved her, and I miss her. I miss the good parts about her, but there was so much about her that wasn't good for me. That both of those feelings are fused together. I'm experiencing disassociation or a total detachment from my feelings. That goes all the way back to the sexual trauma. That was how I got through it. I went somewhere else in my mind. I just wasn't there to whatever was happening with my body. I just went somewhere else. And while that was the coping mechanism that got me through that time, that doesn't work today. Today, I need to be in the present, in the moment, being authentic for now. That's the way that I get through it, because I am no longer that child that doesn't have any options. I have options, and I have the ability to set boundaries and to be a little bit more in charge of my own life now than I was then. Sometimes the feelings that I have been internally censored. Even when I try to access it, I draw a blank. Because of all the spiritual confusion in my life, sometimes, and I'm still working out all that stuff of where I really land on a lot of issues. And so therefore, sometimes some things that I have are being censored, that I've labeled some feelings as bad when they're just feelings. They're neither good nor bad. And I know this in my mental mind, but sometimes, this default back to the, history in the back will label these things. It'll be triggered as a bad feeling, and then I just want to censor it, and I just want to move on. So, working through those kinds of things. Okay, so what does CoDA say about this? So I have difficulty identifying what I'm feeling. In the Blue Book, it says we often get caught in negative situations that impact our mental and physical health and the well-being of others. Some of us may be unable to recognize our feelings and comprehend the disastrous path we're on. We call this denial. And I had the Kindle edition, so this was on page 18 of the Kindle edition of the book. It also says that many of us seek false gods. We numb our feelings with alcohol, drugs, food, sex, or work. These often turn into chronic addictions and compound our problems. None of them provide us freedom or peace. Also from the CoDA Blue Book on page 22. In our devotional in this moment, it says, I am learning. For today, I am learning who I am. No feelings were expressed in my house when I was growing up. Consequently, I learned not to feel. I developed several ways to keep my feelings down. I would get depressed instead of angry, anxious instead of scared or sad. If that didn't work, I'd overeat to stuff the feelings. Now that I'm an adult in recovery, I'm learning that it's okay to feel, but it's still hard. If I feel depressed and anxious, I still want to eat a box of cookies. I agree with that. But What I've learned to do is to identify those dysfunctional coping mechanisms as signals that I'm feeling something I need to deal with. I ask myself, what am I feeling? And then, what do I need to do about it? With the help of my meetings and higher power, I'm learning who I am. And that's from our In This Moment daily meditation book on page 43 on the Kindle version, of course. Okay. So let's go ahead. What time is it now? It's 1:21. So we'll go ahead and get into this first part of an exercise. So for us today, I've got a couple different exercises and writing exercises for us. And so one of in recovery part, it talks about I learned the difference between my thoughts and feelings. And so I found this example to kind of be a good example. So we have thoughts, what we think and how we feel and act, emotions, how we feel affects what we think and do, and then our behavior, what we affects how what we do affects how we think and feel. And you notice that these arrows are going back and forth between all of these because each one of these things can affect the other in different ways. All right, so let's look at an example of that. So thoughts are the words that run through your mind. They're the things that you tell yourself about what's going on around you. And there are many different thoughts that you could have about a single situation. All right. And then feelings come and go as different things happen to you. You might feel happy, angry, and sad all in one day, or even maybe all at one time. It could happen. I've experienced it. Some feelings are uncomfortable, but they are not bad. Everyone has these feelings from time to time. Actions or behaviors are the things that you do or the way you behave. Your thoughts and feelings have a big impact on how you act. If you feel happy, you are likely to do nice things, but if you feel angry, you might want to act mean. All right, so let's look at this in a scenario. So this was actually one that I got um, um, sorry, one that I got, and it was actually geared toward kids, but I think it's still applicable to us. So my thoughts are, I thought, Emma hasn't talked to me much this week. She must be mad at me. What did I feel? I felt sad and hurt. My actions, because I was upset, I ignored Emma and avoided going to her at school, or this could be work, or in a meeting, or at church, or at the grocery store, or whatever, right? This could happen. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing the differentiation between what our thoughts are versus what we feel about it versus what we do about it. Does that make sense, you guys? Okay, I can't really see anybody. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. Okay, so what we want to do is maybe come up with some new thoughts, some new feelings, or new actions related to this situation. So we've got 3 different examples here. Emma, my first new thought could be, Emma might be upset with me, but maybe not. I don't know. We don't really have all the facts, right? My new feeling could be concerned that Emma might be upset, but I'm not as sad as I was. And I could have asked Emma if she's mad at me or if she has another problem. That's one way we could handle that. Another way is Emma has probably been busy with school or something else. And my feeling could be I'm disappointed. I haven't talked to her, but understanding. I could also stay friendly with Emma as usual and be sure to say hi anyway. In other words, not take it too personally. 3, maybe Emma is upset about something unrelated to me. So Emma might still be upset, but she's not upset at me. And my new feelings could be worried about how Emma is feeling. And my new action could be asking her what's going on or if she needs help. Now, neither one of these or any of these are either good nor bad, or right or wrong answer. We're going to have to determine for ourselves in every given situation what we're going to allow our thoughts to be, what we're going to focus on. And what comes to mind right now is that there's an analogy between, 2 tigers, and which one are you going to feed? Are you going to feed the fear one, or are you going to feed the more proactive one? And I'm sure I'm butchering that, but the idea is that what you feed grows, or what you water, what seed you water is going to grow. So, our thoughts are those seeds that we have that can grow. Which one are we going to water? Are we going to continue to water the one up here where she hasn't talked to me, and so I'm going to feel sad and hurt? Or am I going to come down here into a more proactive option? Okay. And then our feelings are involved, because once we have thoughts going on, we have feelings that are going on, and our feelings also affect our thoughts. Remember, these go back and forth between the three. They're not isolated in and of themselves. So we can decide what new feelings we're going to have, and we can also decide what actions we're going to take. But all of these are dealing with our feelings. We're not ignoring them. We're not shoving them down. We're not pretending that they don't have any power or influence in our life. We're recognizing that they do, and now we're being proactive about what it is that we're going to do about it. And we're going to take some time, and in this situation, they're not recommending this, but I recommend spending some time with your higher power and asking for wisdom and discernment and guidance on what to do about any situation. So, okay. So, what I'd like you guys to do is think about a situation recently that was significant for you. It doesn't have to be bad or good in your viewpoint, just one that's significant for you. And write on a piece of paper, basically kind of at the top, what happened. And then write what your thoughts were about it. And again, the thoughts are the things that you're thinking versus how you're feeling. Then write how you're feeling about it. And if you have a feelings wheel, I'm going to pop up here in a minute, but a feelings wheel to kind of identify some of the feelings. And then also write down some of the actions that you took from there. Maybe something that, you didn't really like how you responded, maybe. So pick something like that. Let's go ahead and take another 10 minutes. So we'll come back. So go ahead and write that down. And then also come up with, for the 10-minute time, come up with 3 sets of different new thoughts, new feelings, and new actions that you could do. And what I'll do is I'll try and put the spreadsheet, this actual sheet, in the text. So let me find that to put in there. Okay, how's everybody doing? We thinking that we're ready to go? Okay. I think that was plenty of time, honestly, maybe too much. So I'm going to go ahead and stop our timer. Okay, so let's, does anybody want to share anything that they had to write down, their situation and kind of what they came up with? Does anybody want to share? Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next part. I did want to read this. This kind of felt good for me in the moment at this time. That in this moment, I'm deeply grateful to CoDA. CoDA offers me a safe space and the tools necessary to begin the healing process of recovery. Not every day is peaceful. Many are painful as I face and feel the frozen feelings from my past. Through the recovery process, which continually evolves, I gain greater ability to establish and maintain healthy and loving relationships, not only with others, but unexpectedly and awesomely with myself and my beloved higher power. Awareness of healing changes me within and leads me to gratitude, from which I derive strength and hope. In this moment, I am secure. From our In This Moment Daily Meditation book on page 47 in the Kindle edition. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is work on an exercise where we become more aware of our feelings and identify them often in the moment. And so this is called an emotional check-in exercise. And so we're going to go through first and we're going to set the stage. And then we're going to do a little bit of deep breathing. We're going to scan our bodies for where we're feeling emotions in our, where we're feeling things in our body. Then we're going to check in with the emotions. And then we're going to have a little time to journal after that. And then we'll come back to share with whoever wants to share at that point for whatever came up. Okay, so let's do this. So hopefully everybody's in a quiet and comfortable space where you won't be interrupted. So get comfy, put your feet up, whatever it is you need to do. And so I'm going to give everybody a moment to kind of get where they're be comfortable. Okay. And sit or lie down. It's either one is good as long as you're comfy. All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to begin with a few deep breaths to help relax and become more present in the moment. So I want you to inhale deeply through your nose and hold it for a moment. And then exhale slowly through your mouth. And let's repeat this a few more times. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Okay, and while you're breathing, continue to inhale and exhale. I want you to pay attention to any physical sensations you may be experiencing. These could be tension, warmth, discomfort. Starting from the top of your head, slowly move down your body and bring awareness to each part as you go. Include your face, your neck, your shoulders, your arms, your chest, your abdomen, your back, your hips, your legs, your feet. Take your time and pay attention to the sensations in your body. Okay, now I want you to focus on your emotions. Recall any recent events and thoughts that may have triggered a reaction. And thinking about these feelings, using a feelings charter list if you need, identify the emotions that you're currently experiencing right now. Where are you experiencing them? Where do you feel that in your body? And remember that emotions can be complex and nuanced, so you can feel more than one at a time. Where are they hitting you at? Okay? And when you're ready, write down on your piece of paper or your journal any emotions that you've identified and where you felt them in your body, and describe them in detail. And what was the trigger for that? And what were any thoughts or feelings associated with that? And I would add to that any actions that you might have taken also, or any actions that you might want to take. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes to journal. Okay, that is time. So, does anybody want to share anything that came up for them? All right. So in case you don't have, this is the feelings wheel, which I evidently put in the wrong place in the presentation. Sorry, y'all. This is what the feelings wheel looks like. I got this from the Gento Institute. So that's the one that I use. There's a few different iterations out there, but this one is the one, and it helped me. I like the fact that it breaks it down into these main areas, and then further, each one is broken down a little bit further, and it kind of helps me to see groups of families of feelings, which is nice. Excuse me. Okay. So in this moment, I have a new voice. In recovery, hold on, I need to move the participants out of the way. In recovery, I discovered my favorite feeling, joy. Feelings overwhelmed me before CoDA. For a while, I didn't know that I had feelings. Now I smile with awareness and rejoice in gratitude. I wrestle with fear and anger and hurt. A new spirit drives me. I don't doubt my authenticity. There is a new voice I call my own. I feel a new power within. That's from page 20 in this moment daily meditation book. In recovery, we learn to build faith and hope and progressively surrender our lives to the care of a loving higher power. We learn to let go of our controlling and avoidance behaviors, to resolve our feelings about what we do, and to emotionally detach from those on whom we compulsively rely. That's from our blue book on page 25 in the Kindle edition. I just want to say thank you all for letting me be here today to share. I hope that it is my greatest hope that anything that I said could be useful and helpful in your life. And that's why I'm here and sharing. And I'm thankful for all that CoDA and the people in CoDA that are on what one of my friends would call my bench, um, help me. And so I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for you all and for sharing, all those that shared, just sharing your feelings and being vulnerable with us. I know that that helps others too. I'm glad that we're not alone. I know it's hard sometimes to sit in the feelings. I personally find that hard to do, and I have to discipline myself to do that. But little bit by little bit, my iceberg is melting. And so little bit by little bit, it gets smaller and smaller, and more and more and more of it is above the surface and not frozen mass down below. And it just takes time. It's progress, not perfection in this program. And I'm just thankful for that. And I'm thankful through all my imperfections today, you guys stuck with me. So thank you for that too. And